Why can't we just say anti-Semitism on college campuses is wrong? Why can't we have a full stop right there? Perhaps it's because the politics of it is so entangled that the quagmire pit, we must have everything thrown into the bucket, as opposed to just speaking the truth as it is right now on college campuses. Why can't we just condemn anti-Semitism on its face? Why is it so hard for my Democratic colleagues to condemn what Senator Sanders says, and I agree, the oldest form of hate in the world? Why can't we just do that right now? We deserve leadership that speaks to the issue of the day, today, and every day. That's why people are so disgusted with politics.
I would agree with Senator Scott on one point. People are disgusted with politics. And maybe the reason that they are disgusted with politics is, despite what the vast majority of the American people want, the United States government is continuing to provide billions of dollars in military aid to the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government. Well, I would suggest to Senator Scott, remember what happened a number of months ago in November, I believe, of 23. 3 young Palestinian college students were shot at close range in my city. Islamophobia in this country is on the rise. If you're a Palestinian walking the streets, you better be careful. So the idea that we should not, as a nation and as a Congress, come together to address anti-Semitism, absolutely. But Islamophobia, we have, as you know, some people out there talking about the Chinese flu and Kung flu. If you think that that does not provoke anti-Asian behavior on the part of some, you would be mistaken. So I think what is appropriate is for us to condemn anti-Semitism, which is exactly what my resolution does, but make it clear that all forms of bigotry in this country are unacceptable.
Mr. President, in the first 48 hours following the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel, violent language and threats against the Jewish community and Israel increased by over 488%. This hatred is spreading like wildfire on college campuses around the nation, turning our so-called elite academic institutions into cesspools of harassment and violence pointed toward Jewish students. Any student who advocates for murder and sympathizes with terrorists should be expelled. Any university that allows itself to become a megaphone for hatred should lose every single dime of their federal funding. Any college administrator who refuses to stamp out violent bigotry should lose their job. The American people, and especially our Jewish brothers and sisters, deserve our moral clarity on this issue. Let us all send a very clear message to our Jewish students and to those who oppose them. It is vital that this body, the so-called most deliberative body on the planet, stands united and speaks with moral clarity on this issue.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to SRES 670, which, in my view, does in fact not go far enough to address the very serious crisis of bigotry taking place all over this country. Let me be very clear. Anti-Semitism is a vile and disgusting form of bigotry that has existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and in the last century resulted in the deaths of at least 6 million people, including some in my own family. And I strongly and unequivocally condemn all forms of anti-Semitism. In addition, it is imperative that Congress, representing the American people, makes clear our strong opposition to all forms of bigotry in this country, whether on college campuses or elsewhere, including Islamophobia, homophobia, racism, and the growing attacks against the Asian American community. Our goal must be to bring people together as one nation, regardless of our religion, regardless of where we were born, regardless of the color of our skin. And the resolution that I am offering, which I hope will be accepted, makes that abundantly clear. No to anti-Semitism, no to Islamophobia, no to all forms of racism and bigotry. And, Mr. President, as we do our best to combat racism and all of its ugly manifestations, we must also hold our heads high and with pride as we honor the First Amendment to our Constitution, brilliantly developed by the founders of this country. And let me simply read, because some may have forgotten, what the First Amendment says. And I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances," end of quote. That, Mr. President, is what a free country is about: the right to disagree with government and the right to protest. And those are rights that every member of Congress should respect, no matter what one's political point of view may be. Mr. President, I happen to believe that protesting injustice is part of the American tradition, going back to the very founders of this country, and has played a fundamental role in recent decades in the fight to overcome racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination. I would remind my colleagues, for example, that the success of the civil rights movement was due in large part to sit-ins and occupations where young black and white Americans bravely took up space in private businesses, demanding an end to the racial discrimination and segregation that existed at that time. I would also remind my colleagues that during the Vietnam War, students and millions of other Americans, including myself, joined peaceful demonstrations demanding an end to that war. Maybe, just maybe, tens of thousands of American lives and countless Vietnamese lives might have been saved if the government had listened to those demonstrators. And further, let us not forget those who demonstrated against the failed wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Maybe those protesters should have been listened to as well. You know, despite what some people think here, government policy regarding wars is not always right. In fact, in recent history, it has mostly been wrong. Mr. President, I do find it extraordinary, both tonight and listening to my colleagues, and what I have heard for many months now, that this body is very quick to bring forth bills and resolutions condemning student protesters. But there has been minimal discussion about what these young people are protesting. And that is rather extraordinary. I didn't hear one word of it tonight. What are they out demonstrating about? What have millions of people gone to the streets and talking about? So let me take this opportunity to do just that. We all know, as has been stated correctly this evening, that on October 7, 2023, Hamas, a terrorist organization, began this war with an attack on Israel that killed 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, and took over 200 people captive, many of whom are still in captivity tonight. I think all of us believe, and I know that all of us believe, that this horrific attack must be unequivocally condemned. And I believe that all of us understand that Israel had the right to defend itself against Hamas. But I certainly do not believe, nor do a strong majority of the American people believe, that the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government has the right to wage an unprecedented all-out war against the Palestinian people. And what these protests are largely about, and what public opinion is showing, is outrage that since October 7th, the Netanyahu government has killed more than 34,000 Palestinians and injured more than 78,000, 70% of whom are women and children. That is over 5% of the 2.2 million people living in Gaza. And that, Mr. President, is what the vast majority of people in this country who are protesting are talking about. Protesters and the majority of the American people are outraged that 1.8 million people, 80% of the population of Gaza, have been forced out of their homes, 80% forced out of their homes and sent to overcrowded and dangerous locations. Protesters and the American people in general are deeply concerned about the destruction of over 200,000 housing units, destroyed, leaving more than 1 million people in Gaza homeless. The American people and protesters are deeply worried, concerned about what happens to these people in the future. They got no home. Where do they go? How do they live? The American people and protesters are outraged that the civilian infrastructure of Gaza has been devastated, with approximately 60% of water and sanitation facilities damaged or destroyed and electricity almost entirely shut off. Raw waste is now seeping into the streets throughout Gaza because their wastewater systems have been destroyed. The American people and American doctors I have talked to who were in Gaza are shocked that the healthcare system of Gaza has been systematically destroyed, with 26 hospitals knocked out of service and more than 400 healthcare workers killed. And, Mr. President, when we talk about college campuses, and I understand that is the discussion here tonight, I want everyone to know that there are no protests on the college campuses in Gaza. Nobody is feeling discomfort. You know why? Because every one of the 12 universities in Gaza has been bombed and destroyed. And as we speak, against explicit and repeated warnings from President Biden, Israel is attacking Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians have sought refuge. And that situation will only accelerate the crisis that Mrs. McCain and others in the humanitarian world have talked about, and that is famine is imminent in Gaza, and God knows how many children are already dying of malnutrition. Mr. President, the fact of the matter is that some 67% of Americans, according to recent polls, support the United States calling for a ceasefire, and 60% oppose sending more weapons to Israel. And that's what the protesters are talking about. They are asking why it is we are complicit in the humanitarian disaster taking place in Gaza. And why? Well, we got hundreds of thousands of people homeless throughout this country. We're giving $20 billion more to the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government. So no, Mr. President, it's not just protesters on college campuses who are upset about U.S. policy with regard to Israel and Gaza. Increasingly, American people want an end to U.S. complicity in the humanitarian disaster that is unfolding there. Mr. President, I will therefore be offering an alternative resolution to the one that Senator Scott offered, which does the following, and I hope it would gain unanimous support. One, strongly condemns the rise of anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, anti-Asian, and any other form of discrimination on the campuses of schools and institutions of higher education across the United States. So it does what Senator Scott proposes, but it does more. Number two, strongly affirms Congress's support for the First Amendment to the Constitution and freedom of speech and dissent. Three, strongly supports the right of students and all Americans to peacefully protest. Four, urges the Department of Education to take necessary actions to ensure that schools and institutions of higher education are complying with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to provide all students, including students who are or perceived to be Jewish, Israeli, Muslim, Arab, or Palestinian, a school environment free from discrimination based on race, religion, color, or national origin. And lastly, strongly urges school leaders, college administrators, and local, state, and federal leaders to take all necessary steps to protect students' safety and civil rights, including their right to peacefully assemble and protest. Therefore, I object to this resolution.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
The senator from South Carolina.
reserving the right to object. No? Let me just respond to my good friend on the other side of the ocean and this aisle. I wonder, in the 1960s, when there were black students, what did they want then? It wasn't a resolution condemning all hate when they were the only target of the hate. It was support for those who were being victimized in the moment. Not a resolution that muddies the water. Every single challenge facing the folks in the Middle East as a result of Hamas attacking Israel, every drop of blood is on the hands of the terrorists in Hamas. Period. Every challenge facing folks in Gaza that is a result of Hamas terrorizing the nation of Israel is on the shoulders of Hamas. When you start the war, every innocent life, every unnecessary death is on you, plain and simple. Let me just say that it is a coalition government in Israel, a unanimous coalition government in Israel supporting the efforts of Israel to eliminate Hamas from the planet. And I do too, 100%.
Senator Scott said it's a coalition government. It is. It is right-wing extremists in coalition with out-and-out racists. That's the coalition. And people are disgusted because they don't want to see their money going to kill more women and children in Gaza. Now, Senator Scott says that muddying the waters. Really? Well, I would suggest to Senator Scott, remember what happened a number of months ago in November, I believe, of 23. 3 young Palestinian college students were shot at close range in my city. Islamophobia in this country is on the rise. If you're a Palestinian walking the streets, you better be careful. So the idea that we should not, as a nation and as a Congress, come together to address anti-Semitism, absolutely. But Islamophobia, we have, as you know, some people out there talking about the Chinese flu and Kung flu. If you think that that does not provoke anti-Asian behavior on the part of some, you would be mistaken. So I think what is appropriate is for us to condemn anti-Semitism, which is exactly what my resolution does, but make it clear that all forms of bigotry in this country are unacceptable.